The air still smelled of gasoline and melted plastic when we realized we had crossed a line that shouldn't exist. I remember Mark's hoarse laugh as he hurled another glass bottle against the ancient trunk, the crash echoing like a futile gunshot in the forest that suddenly fell silent. We were 5 fools drunk on our own youth and stupidity, Chloe with her expensive camera documenting our adventure, Dave with his machete smeared with the sap of young trees he enjoyed mutilating, Bobby always trailing Mark like an eager shadow, and me, the coward, the one who knew it was wrong but never spoke up, swallowing fear with more warm beer. The Blackwood Falls forest always had a bad reputation. Stories of missing hikers, strange lights, a silence that weighed on the shoulders like a damp cloak. But we were invincible, or at least stupid enough to believe it, especially after we deliberately set fire to an ancient clearing, just to see the fire dance, as Mark had said with eyes gleaming with a madness I recognized too late. The fire crackled, consuming emerald green moss and lichen that took centuries to grow, and the sweet, nauseating stench of destruction filled our lungs like a perverse drug. That's when the first branch snapped, not above us, but behind, as if something huge and heavy was moving with infinite patience among the trees that now seemed closer, denser, their intertwined canopies blocking the full moon that had earlier lit our way back. The silence that followed wasn't an absence of sound. It was a solid, oppressive presence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath and turning its gaze upon us. Dave was the first to notice the stars had vanished, not because of clouds, but because the leafy ceiling above seemed to have lowered, swallowing the sky. A shiver having nothing to do with the night's cold ran down my spine, a primal instinct screaming that we were being watched, not by an animal, but by something that belonged to that ancient darkness, something that considered our intrusion and vandalism an intimate desecration. The path back, the one we'd marked with bright plastic tape hours before, was simply gone. The tapes had vanished, or perhaps the trees had swallowed them, their dark, twisted trunks seeming to have moved, repositioned in a labyrinthine, hostile pattern. Chloe began to sob, the muffled sound echoing strangely, as if the forest absorbed and returned only the noises it wanted. Bobby was the one who screamed first, a high-pitched shriek full of panic that turned into a wet, horrible gurgle. I saw his silhouette, lit only by the weak light of Dave's wildly trembling flashlight, being lifted off the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, pulled upwards into the dark claws of the lowest branches of an oak tree I swore hadn't been there before. I heard the sound of fabric tearing and something like dry twigs snapping inside his body, a final wet crunch that silenced his scream forever. Something dark and viscous dripped from the canopy, warm when it hit my face, and the smell of fresh copper and rotten earth filled the air. Mark screamed something unintelligible, a mix of rage and absolute terror, and fired his 12-gauge shotgun blindly into the trees, the blasts absurdly loud but having no effect, except to make more branches stir, as if the forest was laughing. That's when I saw the eyes. Not 2, but 10s, perhaps hundreds points of a phosphorescent light, greenish-yellow and cold as the bottom of a swamp, opening in the shadows between the trees, at ground level, suspended in the air, hovering just above us. They weren't animal eyes. They were old, intelligent, and filled with a glacial fury that pierced my soul. They didn't blink, just watched, following our every movement with the attention of a predator who knows its prey is already cornered. We ran. There was no direction, only the animal impulse to flee that unbearable observation, that presence emanating from the earth, the trees, the very air that now seemed thick as molasses, making it hard to breathe. Chloe stumbled and fell, her camera hitting a root with a crack of broken plastic. She tried to get up, moaning, reaching her hand out to me. But before I could reach her, the roots on the ground, thick and gnarled like petrified snakes, moved. They coiled around her ankles with supernatural speed, dragging her down into the black, loamy earth that seemed to open like a mouth. Her scream was smothered in seconds, choked off by soil closing over her like water over a stone, leaving only a dark stain and the last image of her wide eyes, filled with incomprehensible terror, before they were swallowed. Dave, the machete man, the tree destroyer, panicked. He brandished his blade against the nearest trunks, hacking at the bark with savage force, shouting curses, defying the forest. The trees didn't bleed sap. From the gashes, a thick, black liquid oozed, steaming in the cold air, smelling of rot and sulfur that made my eyes water. That liquid, like poisonous blood, splashed onto Dave's arm. He screamed, a sound no longer human, as the skin on his forearm began to steam and bubble, peeling away from the bone in black, shriveled strips like burnt crepe paper. He fell to his knees, trying to rub off the venom, only spreading the corrosion further. The shadows around him deepened, and indistinct shapes, made of twisted branches and dry leaves, seemed to materialize, wrapping around him, dragging him into a thicket of thorns that closed like a trap of living steel. His screams didn't last long, turning into rasping sounds and then into a silence more terrifying than any shriek. Only Mark and I remained. The leader, the architect of our arrogance, now looked like a lost boy. His face smeared with soot and something darker, eyes wide, breath a hoarse whistle in his chest. His courage had evaporated, replaced by an animal fear that smelled of urine and sour sweat. We tried to get back to the burned clearing, the site of our original sin, perhaps with the childish hope that somehow we could erase it. But the forest wouldn't allow it. The same trees seemed to repeat themselves. The same rocky outcrops appeared ahead like teeth in a gigantic jaw. And the eyes, those cold green eyes, were always there, at the edges of our vision, floating, following, never closer, never farther, just present, a silent, implacable jury. Mark began to rave, babbling about lights and voices, whispering his name in tongues that made my skin crawl. He pointed at shadows that contorted with lives of their own, shapes resembling creatures made of bark and moss, with horns of dry branches and torn mouths where there was only darkness and the gleam of more of those cursed lights. He said they laughed at him, a sound like wind whistling through hollow bones. At one point, he stopped suddenly, staring fixedly at a point behind me, beyond the reach of my failing flashlight, the flicker of the dying battery creating strobes of terror. She came for the fire, he whispered, his voice broken, almost reverent. And then he ran, not towards anywhere, but into the densest darkness, towards where the green eyes were most numerous, like moths drawn to a flame. I heard his scream, short and cut off, and then a flash of light that illuminated nothing, only cast grotesque, dancing shadows on the trees for a fraction of a second. A cold greenish flash that smelled of ozone and burnt flesh, but emitted no heat. Afterwards, only darkness again, and a low hiss, like wind passing through a crack, that seemed to contain a deep, ancient satisfaction. Now I am alone. The flashlight died completely, plunging me into a darkness so absolute it feels physical, a black velvet pressing against my eyes. But I feel the forest. I feel its anger, a living, pulsing force in the soil beneath my feet, in the trunks that seem to breathe slowly around me, in the air that weighs like lead in my lungs. The eyes are still there, countless, watching me from the safety of the shadows. I don't run anymore. It's no use. Blackwood Falls isn't just a forest. It's a conscious organism, an ancient entity that slept beneath a thin crust of respect, and we poked it with a burning stick. Whatever is out there, the protector, the vengeance, the forest itself incarnate, is in no hurry. It knows I am the last. It knows I am cornered. The whispers began, not in the air, but inside my mind, overlapping voices made from the creak of branches, the rustle of dry leaves, the drip of that black sap. They tell stories, ancient stories of others who disrespected, of blood watering the deepest roots, of bones turning to stone beneath moss. They promise my death won't be quick, that my essence will nourish what we destroyed, that my agony will echo in these trees as long as they live, which may be forever. Slash I feel thin, cold roots like corpse fingers coiling around my ankles. Not with force yet, just a touch, a reminder. Slash I smell the scent of wet earth and sweet decay intensifying, coming from all directions. Slash I look frantically around, but I only see the darkness and those floating green points of light, drawing closer now, slowly, inexorably, forming a tight circle around me. Slash there is no escape. Slash there is no forgiveness. Slash only the echo of our stupid acts returning to us in the oldest and most terrible form of justice. Slash the forest breathes deeply, and I close my eyes, waiting for the final touch, knowing the true terror isn't in death, but in what the entity of Blackwood Falls will do to me before letting me go. Slash, and the most terrifying thing of all, the final thought clinging to my mind as the shadows close in, is that in some deep, primordial way, we deserve every second of what is to come. Slash the darkness moves. Slash she comes. Slash. The smell of damp earth and charred flesh still clung to my nostrils when I found the first child's bone beneath the rotting porch boards of the house I'd inherited in Blackwater. Slash I'd bought the place cheap, lured by the quiet charm of this forgotten corner in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia, far from the chaos of Chicago where my marriage and sanity had crumbled. Slash Blackwater seemed enchanted, literally, with its overly clean cobblestone streets, flowers perpetually vibrant even in drought, and the smiles of its people, like Mr. Thomas, the baker, and Mrs. Martha, the retired midwife, always perfect, always slightly fixed. Slash prosperity was palpable, an economic miracle in the region's harshness, every business thriving, harvests bountiful, a harmony that reeked of rot beneath its sweet veneer. Slash me, Robert, a bankrupt architect seeking a fresh start, should have listened to the whispers in empty bars, the averted gazes when I asked about the town's history, the old abandoned chapel on Raven's Hill, or the unexplained disappearances of travelers decades back, noted in yellowed newspapers I found in the dusty attic. Slash but Blackwater's serene beauty was a well-oiled trap, a veil over an abyss. Slash finding that bone, small, fragile, still clinging to a scrap of pink ribbon, was no accident. Slash the loose soil under the porch screamed to be dug up, a cold, insistent voice in my mind I blamed on stress and isolation. Slash I found more, many more, a shallow grave beneath my own home, bones arranged in strange geometric patterns around black ash and a small obsidian artifact, cold as ice, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. Slash fear was an icy fist in my gut, but morbid fascination, the need to understand my inheritance, was stronger. Slash. It was Mrs. Martha who gave the first real clue, not with words, but her eyes. Slash during a polite visit, bearing warm cornbread, her eyes, usually warm as honey, froze when they saw the dirt under my nails, the soil I'd unconsciously failed to scrub clean. Slash a flash of genuine panic, sharp as a knife's edge, crossed her face before the plastic smile returned. Slash she hurried away, her quick steps on the stone path echoing like a racing heartbeat. Slash that night, I felt the first persistent stares from the dark windows of neighboring houses, like dull lights watching, assessing. Slash the atmosphere shifted, the once fresh mountain air grew heavy, thick with silent, menacing expectation. Slash shadows around the house, especially near the old oak tree in the yard, seemed denser, more aware, swallowing the light from my porch bulb. Slash I started dreaming, vivid, terrible dreams, always involving the chapel on the hill. Slash I'd see myself dragged by a silent crowd of townsfolk, familiar faces like Thomas, young Mayor Charles, even sweet schoolteacher Anna, all expressionless, dressed in tattered old clothes, carrying torches burning with cold, black flame. Slash we'd march up the hill in procession, and inside the ruined chapel, something waited, something moving in the deepest dark, with the sound of leathery wings tearing and a sulphurous stench that woke me choking, heart pounding like a drum of panic. Slash the dreams were warnings, omens, and I ignored them out of sheer, desperate stupidity. Slash. Research became a dangerous obsession. Slash in the town library, a damp basement smelling of mold and secrets. I found censored records, pages ripped from ledger books, veiled mentions in old pastors' diaries. Words like Pact, Entity, New Blood, Harvest appeared, always followed by periods of inexplicable prosperity or abruptly halted calamities. I uncovered the lean years, decades back, when terrible droughts and sickness killed livestock and children, ending suddenly after the disappearance of an entire family of outsiders who tried to settle here. The pattern was clear, sinister. Blackwater wasn't blessed, it was protected. And protection had a periodic price in innocent blood. The Pact, made on a moonless night in times long forgotten by desperate ancestors, kept the entity dormant, or satisfied, in exchange for regular offerings. Outsiders were preferred, but when none were found, the town's own children could be the currency. The bone with the pink ribbon took on unbearable weight in my mind. My arrival, alone, family-less, marked by failure, must have seemed like Providence, the next harvest conveniently delivered. The haunted house at the town's edge was the perfect trap. The horror wasn't just the act, but the chilling normalcy with which the entire town, generation after generation, participated in or condoned the sacrifice. Their prosperity was built on children's bones and stolen souls. The pressure built like air before a violent storm. I found dead animals in my yard, chickens with necks impossibly twisted, a cat with its eyes gouged out, arranged in small circles near the oak tree. Warnings. Food from the market began tasting metallic, once, faintly, like bitter ashes. They tried poisoning, but weakly, perhaps hoping I'd flee, making an accident easier on the dusty road out of town. People on the streets stopped looking at me. Their faces were stone masks as I passed, the silence around me so thick I could hear my own blood humming. Even the wind seemed to whisper my name. Robert, Robert. In multiple, distorted voices from dark alleys or the hilltop where the chapel loomed against the night sky. I knew I was being cornered, prepared. The day of the next harvest neared, felt it in my bones, a date marked by ancient cycles I didn't understand but echoed in the town's palpable tension, in discreet preparations. In the black candles I glimpsed through a crack in the window of the Blackwood family's house, the oldest in Blackwater. I tried to flee. Twice. First, my car wouldn't start, the new battery completely drained. Second, the main road out was blocked by a sudden rock slide, while silent figures watched from the ridges, black silhouettes against the dust. I was trapped, prey in a gilded, cursed cage. The night of the ritual arrived with absolute, unnatural silence. No dogs barked. No crickets chirped. Even the wind died. The moon, full and red like an open wound in the sky, cast a bloody light over Blackwater, turning the white houses into stained teeth in a giant's jaw. I knew what was coming. The dreams had shown me. Fighting an entire town and whatever dwelled in that chapel was impossible. Fear was a live animal tearing at my insides, but beneath it, cold rage and a perverse resolve took root. If I was the chosen sacrifice, I wouldn't go easy. I wouldn't go without seeing the demon's face. I hid in the cellar of the old house, among the stone foundations where the bones were found, armed only with a weak flashlight and a kitchen knife, a pathetic weapon against what approached. I heard them come. Not footsteps, but a collective sliding, a whisper of countless feet on dirt. The front door didn't hold, splintering with a dry crack. They flooded in, not shouting, but in a terrifying silence broken only by the crackle of their black-flamed torches, illuminating faces I knew, now vacant, possessed by mortal resignation. Thomas, Charles, Anna, Mrs. Martha, all with glazed eyes, pupils dilated to near black, moving like automatons guided by a greater will. They searched the house, methodical, relentless. Slash they knew I was here. Slash they smelled my fear, my sweat. Slash when they found the cellar door, locked from inside, they didn't break it down. Slash they simply stopped before it, forming a perfect silent semicircle. Slash the darkness behind them in the ruined living room seemed to coagulate, thicken. Slash and then, something moved within that darkness. Slash something enormous, impossible for that room. Slash I felt, more than saw, a presence that weighed on the world, a coldness not from the air, but from the universe's depths, a stench of rotten ozone and advanced decay that made me gag. Slash the entity. Slash the Pact demon. Slash it wasn't a figure. It was an absence of light with indistinct edges, like a living oil slick, pulsing with malign energy that made my teeth ache and vision blur. Slash within the slick, points of red light glowed like embers, fixing on the cellar door, fixing on me. Slash their minds, the town's mind, converged on that point, a single thought of surrender, of necessary sacrifice. Slash they didn't need to break the door. Slash the old planks themselves began to warp, groan, rot before my eyes, as if time accelerated upon them, consumed by that thing's will. Slash the darkness beyond the threshold began to advance, not like mist, but like a thick, voracious liquid, devouring my flashlight's feeble beam, bringing the vacuum's absolute cold and the whisper of 1,000 desperate voices, the voices of all sacrificed before me. Slash this was the end. Slash I knew there was no appeal, no escape. Slash the knife in my hand was a ridiculous toy. Slash Blackwater's prosperity demanded its tribute, and I was the coin. Slash the last thing I saw before the living darkness enveloped me, sucking air from my lungs and light from my eyes, was the face of little Anna, the teacher, a single thick black tear sliding from her empty eye, the only sign of lingering humanity, or perhaps just remorse. Slash the darkness didn't hurt. It consumed, dissolved, promising annihilation that was also eternal torment. Slash and in my last instant of consciousness, I understood the deepest, most terrifying truth. The pact wasn't just for prosperity, it was to prevent something infinitely worse, the entity's wrath if the harvest failed. In that understanding, a part of me, the part still human, almost forgave them. Slash the darkness swallowed everything. Slash the next morning in Blackwater dawned especially radiant, the air sweeter, the flowers brighter. Slash and in the old house at the town's edge, only silence, and the distant scent of damp earth and ashes. Slash sometimes, on nights of the red moon, folks swear they hear, drifting down from Raven's Hill where the chapel stands darker than ever, a faint sound, like a discordant hunting horn, echoing in the mist. It's followed by a silence that seems to hold an ancient sigh of satisfaction. Then, the church bell tolls by itself, one deep, resonant chime, marking the start of another cycle of bought peace. Slash. The doll skin felt like the cold texture of a tiny corpse when I pulled it from the junk bin at the Sunrise Flea Market in downtown Chicago. Slash it was a gray Saturday, the smell of impending rain mixing with mildew from forgotten things, and my fingers trembled touching that cracked porcelain, its cloudy blue glass eyes fixed on something beyond me. Slash me, Emma, a journalist burned out and hunting for cheap distractions, should have felt disgust, not that sudden, sickening pull, as if the doll in its crumpled dress and faded flaxen hair was calling me. Slash the vendor, an old man with greasy nails and salt and pepper brows named Sal, grinned with sparse teeth at my interest. Slash, take it, lady. Practically given it away. Belonged to a little girl. Gone missing. Slash he didn't elaborate, his gaze sliding away like touching an old wound. Slash I paid $2, stuffed the doll in my bag, and spent the rest of the day feeling a weight and unseen eyes on my back. Slash little did know I just bought a one-way ticket to someone else's private hell. Slash. Back in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, the atmosphere shifted the moment I pulled the doll out. Slash the air, previously warm, turned tomb cold and still. Slash I placed it atop the wardrobe in my bedroom, facing away from the bed, but the sensation of being watched was constant, palpable. That first night, I woke up choking on the thick, cloying scent of baby powder, a smell that had no place in my apartment. The alarm clock glowed 3:17 a.m. From the bed, I could only see the doll's outline on the high furniture, but I swore its pale hair, once limp, was now slightly bristled, as if charged by static. I tried rationalizing. Exhaustion, stress. I failed miserably. The small disturbances started the next day. Objects vanished and reappeared in absurd places. My toothbrush inside the fridge, the TV remote in the cold oven. I found tiny muddy footprints trailing down the hallway, as if a barefoot child had walked in from the street, leading straight under the wardrobe where the doll's Saturday/old photos of me in living room frames awoke, scratched across the faces by something sharp, only the eyes gouged into black holes. Fear, a live, icy creature, began nesting at the base of my skull. Research became a desperate anchor. Vintage doll, flax hair, blue eyes, faded pink dress, USA. The results led to an obscure case from the 70s. Lily Peterson, age 7, disappeared from Chicago's South End in 1975. Last seen carrying her favorite doll, a Molly, a gift from her dead father. The old news reports were terse, full of gaps. A black and white photo of Lily froze me. She was the living image of the doll I possessed, the same light eyes and hair, but with a deep sadness the photo couldn't hide. I dug deeper, into obscure forums and digital archives of defunct newspapers. I found a brief mention in a declassified police testimony, the mother's name, Isabella, and an old address, a street still standing in the South End. The apartment was abandoned. An anonymous neighbor posted on a true crime forum years ago, after the mother went mad and was institutionalized. They said you could hear a child crying at night, even empty. My throat tightened reading the post's last line. The doll was never found. They say it holds onto everything. Holds what? The question echoed in my mind like a scream in my apartment's new, perpetually cold, talcum-stale air. The events escalated from disturbing to terrifying. The whispers began. Childlike voices, distorted and weepy, hissing my name from inside the walls, mostly at night, always near 317. Emma. Hurts. Emma, she hit. One night, I woke to the sensation of small, icy fingers brushing my cheek. Nothing visible, just the overpowering smell of powder and dampness in the air, like tears. The doll, which I'd locked in a trunk inside the closet, was back atop the wardrobe, this time facing the bed, its glass eyes reflecting the weak streetlight with obscene intelligence. Its pink dress, once just dirty, now bore dark stains that smelled like old rust or dried blood. New photos appeared. Not mine, but blurred impressions on printer paper left in the tray. They showed an indistinct female figure, arm raised, and a smaller blur on the floor, smeared with terror. The tragic story revealed itself in nightmare fragments. Lily hadn't just vanished, she'd suffered. Her pain was imprinted on the porcelain and flax of the doll that was her only confidant. And now that pain, that memory of violence, was leaking into my world. The breaking point was the bathroom mirror. I walked in one morning and saw, not my reflection, but that of a thin girl in a torn pink dress, eyes wide with panic, standing behind me. Lily. Her face was marked. One eye swollen and purple, lips cracked. She opened her mouth in a silent scream, and in the reflection, behind her, the indistinct woman from the printed photos materialized, arm raised holding something heavy and gleaming. I spun around, screaming, but the bathroom was empty, only the smell of powder and fear. In the mirror, just me, pale and terrified. I ran to the bedroom, heart hammering like a panic drum. Slash the doll wasn't on the wardrobe anymore. Slash it sat in the center of my bed, head slightly tilted, glass eyes now fixed directly on the door, as if expecting someone. Slash the dark stains on the dress seemed larger, wetter. Slash that's when I noticed the thin, almost invisible strands of pale flax hair snaking out from under the bedroom door, trailing down the hall toward the apartment's front entrance. Slash like tentacles, or roots of a poisonous plant. Slash it was growing. Slash feeding on the terror, the leaking memory, or perhaps calling something. Slash the mother. Slash Isabella. Slash the figure from the photos, the shadow in the mirror. Slash the apartment groaned, like old wood under pressure, and the temperature plummeted, frosting the window edges. Slash the whispers became a chorus, overlapping child voices crying, shrieking fragments. No, Mommy. It hurts. Molly saw everything. Slash the doll Molly seemed larger, more solid, its cracked porcelain pulsing with a faint, sinister light. Slash the strands of flax hair writhed harder, tapping against the front door like impatient fingers. Slash it was clearing a path. Slash bringing the past inside. Slash bringing Isabella. Slash. I didn't think. I acted on terrified survival instinct. Slash I grabbed the doll, its cadaver-cool porcelain burning my skin like dry ice. Slash it seemed to vibrate with rage in my hands, glass eyes locked on mine with primal hatred. Slash the whispers became shrieking cries inside my skull, a cacophony of child pain and fear threatening to burst my eardrums. Slash I ran to the kitchen, ignoring furniture that seemed to shift in the shadows, indistinct shapes flitting at the edge of sight. Slash I yanked the oven door open, turned it to its highest setting, and shoved the doll inside, slamming the door shut. Slash for a second, silence. Slash then, a frantic high-pitched scratching came from inside the oven, like a child's nails scraping metal. Slash a hideous smell, melting porcelain, burning flax, and something organic, like rotting meat cooking, filled the kitchen. Slash the screams in my mind reached a deafening crescendo, a howl of agony and betrayal that dropped me to my knees, hands uselessly clapped over my ears. Slash from inside the oven, a dull thud, then silence. Slash the smell lingered, nauseating. Slash the cold began to slowly dissipate. Slash the whispers stopped. Slash, I thought it was over. Slash fatal mistake. Slash the next morning, the oven was cold, the door intact. Slash inside, only a pile of fine, dark ash, and the persistent stench of destruction. Slash fragile, fleeting relief washed over me. Slash I cleaned the ashes out with disgust, dumped them in the trash on the street. Slash that night, however, I slept fitfully. Slash I dreamed of Lily, not the hurt girl, but a dark, distorted shadow, weeping ashes from its eyes, whispering one word over and over. Molly, Molly, Molly. Slash I woke at 3:17, exactly. Slash the room was cold again. Slash and on the spot where the doll used to sit, atop the wardrobe, a small pile of black ash had formed. Slash in the air, the faint, unmistakable smell of baby powder. Slash and most terrifying of all, in the fine dust on the floor beside my bed, tiny muddy footprints, minuscule, leading from the street trash right back under the wardrobe. Slash she'd come back. Slash not as a doll, but as something worse, an intangible presence, a memory of pain and violence that couldn't be burned, only contained, temporarily. Slash and now, without its physical vessel, it was free, seeping into the walls, the air, into me. Slash the whispers started again, weaker but constant, a child's weeping echoing in the pipes, a scratching inside the walls during the dead of night. Slash the photos in the living room awoke, scratched across the eyes again. Slash peace was an illusion. Slash I hadn't destroyed Molly. I'd just freed her from her form. Now her essence, Lily's pain, Isabella's hatred, was fused with my apartment, and by extension, with me. Slash the physical object was gone, but the curse had melded with the building's foundations, and with my own soul. Slash at 3:17, every single night, I feel the brush of small icy fingers on my face, and the smell of talcum powder invades my lungs like sweet poison. Slash I know Lily is still crying. Slash I know Isabella is still searching. Slash and Molly, formless now but more present than ever, sees everything. Slash waits. Slash whispers. Slash and she won't leave. Slash never again. Slash.